What's going on, guys? I'm back with another 31 Days of Halloween review, and today we're going to be doing somewhat of a cult classic, Hellraiser. Sexual deviant Frank inadvertently opens a portal to hell when he tinkers with a box he bought while he was abroad. The act unleashes gruesome beings called Cenobites who tear Frank's body apart. When Frank's brother and his wife Julia move into Frank's old house, they accidentally bring what is left of Frank back to life. Frank then convinces Julia, his one-time lover, to lure men back to the house so he can use their blood to reconstruct himself. Hellraiser was adapted from a novel, but what Clive Barker does very well is the use of the source material that would work and adapt well on screen, then disposes some of the source material that really wouldn't, so it's more of a coherent, efficient story. In the case of Hellraiser, the film of course, it's definitely pretty odd, yet creative and unique. As a whole, the film is pretty edgy, citing this unsettling tone all throughout the entire runtime, where it brings the meaning to the genre torture porn to a whole new level. The story quite literally doesn't waste a second, just hopping right into things, already setting a fast pace right from the opening credits. The film doesn't have much exposition, but in some aspects, it's a good thing because it leaves some things left to be desired. Speaking of Clive Barker, his hand was all over this film, where sometimes it does come off a bit amateurish, but in a good way, giving it personality. It may not have came out perfect, but you can definitely tell he tried. There were some pretty decent shots from different angles, coupled with some pretty good handheld shots as well. The camera work certainly got a boost from the decently captured color scheme, with a dark, dingy color palette, coupled with natural shadows to block off the look of some things. The editing also played a pretty big part in how this film looked, with a snappy, quick editing style added a decent amount of attention to each scene. As for the acting, it was mainly pretty good all around, where most of the people did their best to give a pretty dark-rooted performance. I thought that Julia, played by Claire Higgins, was definitely the best character in the whole film, where she did a pretty good job selling every scene with a different range of emotion she put out there. She, out of everyone, did the best job showing that sometimes the monsters aren't actually the root issue, it's actually what's inside of us humans and the things we do for what we desire. I also thought Andrew Robinson as Larry did a pretty good job as well for what he was given, selling the majority of his scenes well, especially in the third act. Although I thought Julia was the best character, all the attention goes to the great Cenobites and their designs. Each Cenobite is distinctly different from one another, especially Pinhead. I'd personally say that his overall look is one of the most well-known when it comes to slashers, right next to the Freddys, Jasons, Myers, and even the Chuckies of the world. Unfortunately, although the Cenobites weren't on the front line for most of the film, they definitely had this creepy and very unsettling presence, stealing the show in every scene that they were in, especially Pinhead, where Doug Bradley had tremendous delivery to his lines due to his pronounced voice. When you watch Hellraiser, the characters are good, the story is pretty engaging, but the selling point to the film is definitely the gore and the effects. The film is very violent, where it knew exactly what it was going for when it came to the look of the gore, really expanding the boundaries of the meaning of the word gritty. This film had some pretty decent kills that were handled pretty well for the most part, but a lot of it was due to the practical effects and the makeup, where for me, it was rather groundbreaking for the time. The kills were pretty brutal, being very creative with its visuals, especially considering the low budget, which enhanced it that much more. Although this film had a good bit to be praised about, it definitely doesn't come out unscathed, having more than a few issues, starting with the story approach. It's certainly original, so it receives more points than it does points taken away, but at the end of the day, it is a pretty odd, gothic, kinky story, isn't it? It's just a bit weird when you realize what the motive actually is. Another thing that gains points, but also loses points, is a lack of explanation. I enjoy a film that makes you infer, but with this one, if you lose concentration for just a minute, you can spiral down a never-ending pit of confusion, because things happen so fast with little explanation. And my last issue with the story is the fact the second half can get a bit repetitive. I understand it needs to do what it did to progress the story, but I feel it could have been executed a bit better, and maybe for not as long as it did, because what needed to happen was probably the easiest thing to understand out of everything. Now, my next few issues come from the characters. For starters, when you have Hell Priest, I'm pretty sure that's what he's called anyways, but everyone calls him Pinhead, so I'm going to call him Pinhead, is on the cover of the film, you would expect him to be the main antagonist. He really wasn't in the film all that often, where he sort of felt like a plot device for other things and other installments to come. He was a diabolical presence, but for a standalone film, I simply just needed more of him. My next issue with the characters is with Ashley Lawrence as Kirsty. For one, she doesn't really give the most believable performance, and two, in the third act, she's meant to be our main protagonist, but the whole film, like Pinhead, she sort of felt sidecasted, so I didn't really feel an attachment towards her or a rewarding feeling for what she did. Nothing really felt earned there. And my last few issues came from the effects and post-production sounds. Some of the effects were great, and others looked like they came straight out of a bad video game. A pretty mixed bag, really. Then with the post sounds, the dub voices from English accents to American felt pretty distracting at times, whereas as a whole, the post-production sounds range from fine to pretty bad. Overall, Hellraiser is a good film at the end of the day. It had its good, and it certainly had its bad. It gets a 6 out of 10 for me. Let me know what you think of Hellraiser in the comments below, and let me know what film you'd like to see me review next. See you guys in the next one.